All right, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Lisa O'Brien, and I'll be your host today. We're excited to be back for our second season of our Get a Grip webinar series after taking a little bit of time off. Today, our topic is Are you stacked for success? How to know if your business is ready to automate. So, Alex Berry is back with me, and we'll be discussing things like identifying the low hanging fruit for automation, understanding your scale, and also how future proofing is just another term for having plans B, C, and D lined up. So if you've been thinking about automating your facility or thinking of taking your automation to the next level, today's webinar is for you. We'll also have a few resources to share with you after the webinar. So a few quick notes before we get started. We encourage this to be conversational webinar, so please feel free to turn your cameras on. If you have a question, you can raise your hand, we'll call on you to ask, or you can put it in the chat and we'll do our best to get to it during the presentation, or also maybe just address them at the end too. And then lastly, today's presentation will be recorded and we'll be sending a follow-up email to everybody with a link to the recording. So before we dive in, let's welcome Alex Berry, our presenter today, and go ahead and get started. So Alex, over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Great to have you guys here today. And Lisa obviously introduced the topic today. And then let me get actually on PowerPoint. There we go. Are you stacked for success? This goes in hand with a lot of things you'll find on our website, other white papers, some of the maturity assessment kind of questionnaires that we have as well to understand where you're at in your journey. We'll be going over I'll be kind of discussing what I've seen from our end user side, from my own professional experiences in this journey of automation and staying up with technology and how that can benefit you or your organization, you as well. For people that have been here before, I got a new picture. I love my new pictures. But a little background on me. This is one of I was presenting on Human in the Loop at ProMat in our booth this year. So if you were there, I know a few of you guys maybe were, you might have already seen that, but that was fun. I got a picture, me laughing. The agenda today, like Lisa had outlined, right? I want to start with low-hanging fruit. It's kind of like future proofing for me. Not a phrase I really like, but it's common enough. And I want to talk about some actionable ways in which you can identify that and what it means to actually have low hanging fruit, in your warehouse or in your manufacturing facility. We're going to talk about how you can't skip the line. There's no shortcuts in automation. There's no shortcuts in your organization getting from A to Z, we'll say. We'll talk a little more about some topics I discussed in the past about understanding your scale and really planning out there, and where I've seen organizations that have been successful at that and been able to scale well. It's not necessarily always easy, but at least it doesn't have to be, torturous. We'll go into the future proofing and what another side of future proofing that's not generally discussed, or I don't see generally discussed. And then we'll recap and go over my high points. So, low-hanging fruit is more abundant than you think it is. It is out there in your facilities all over the place, and it doesn't always have to do with a robot. So let me preface that. I did do a nice definition up there for everybody else, and you can see that I didn't like it, so I rephrased it for something practical from an engineering perspective, which is if it's you need to be able to identify it, you need to be able to install whatever the thing is, the robot, the machine, the scan tunnel, the yada yada. It has a good, quick ROI. And the key part at the end of that, if you really address something that's low-hanging fruit, not just something that's easy to automate. Oh, we'll just put this machine in, and this is so easy, it's a drop in. But what makes a low-hanging fruit like a valuable thing to pursue is obviously that it's easy, but that your team is immediately recognizes the impacts and feels that value. It's critical, and we'll go into more points of that as we go through this presentation, but it's really critical that the people on the ground, the people throughout your network, let's say you put in, like one of our DPAL-1 systems, collaborative robot, and it's doing simple DPAL, all brown boxes. There's some slip sheets in there, that kind of thing. They will immediately say, hey, that went in a day. We started using it the same day, and now we don't have to deal with those deep pallets anymore. depalletizing anymore. Like that is one of those things that was a low hanging fruit. There's a machine, it goes in. It took you 3 weeks to get it. It took you a day to get it set up or less. And people immediately started using it and said, hey, great, I don't have to do that anymore. This was a good thing. These are the types of topics that are the types of applications that I really consider low hanging fruit. Not just that they're easy to do and they have a good solution, but there's immediate value from your team members. They see what you did, why you did it, and they're like, I like that. I do put some other kind of guideposts down there on the what do they look like, again from my perspective, from the industry and from obviously the partners we work with and our end users. If you see your people moving heavy things short distances, that here to this conveyor, off this pallet to this conveyor, on a table to a conveyor, or sort of a shelf or whatever, those are the types of things that robots in vision are very good at, right? They can go and pick those things up and move them for you, and your people don't have to pick up the heavy things. In cases like order fulfillment, or going up and down the rows and packing out um, orders and multi SKU line orders and things like that. AMRs are great at that. Easy to integrate. There's plenty of options out there depending on whoever you've integrated with in the past. Wherever you want, specific, feature functions. Plenty of them out there. Excellent. Save so many steps. People immediately see the value when they don't have to walk 14 miles a day, and they cut that to say 7. Similar to like when they don't have to pick up heavy things because a robot does it. They see the immediate value. And then one of the things that comes more from a manufacturing background, installing, we can call them dashboards, you can call them monitors, whatever you want, or you can use tablets now. There's a lot of things that are web-based dashboards that your team members can have the tablets, or you can have the high-mounted TVs that give you the statuses of what's going on this day, where this thing's at, what's going on in this process. So I've seen still in plenty of warehouses where supervisors, especially, and team leaders, like they must walk around the facility just to get the status. It's a good thing they walk around a facility, see their team members, and make sure what's going on, but just to figure out how's sort of doing, how's this going, how's the back going, they need to actually go there instead of having a central location. So those are low hanging fruit that make things more efficient, can improve things, can do other, value adds, but people feel the immediate value. And then I got this cool chart over here, and I like it because it said trap, don't do that. High effort with low value, it's a trap. It's the exact opposite of the low hanging fruit. And I made we obviously have this video on YouTube on our website. You guys can check it out. I like this one because we specifically built this demo to demonstrate that concept of applying automation to low-hanging fruit. You've got simple boxes. You need them to be put on a pallet. You have these simple boxes and you need them taken off a pallet. They go through, let's say, a scan tunnel, and there's something with a WMS system, or they get a print and apply, or they get relabeled for export. Whatever that process is, they just need to be depaled, and then they need to be palletized again. In this specific case, these are the exact same machines. Right? And if you guys were at ProMat, you saw them. I just, said, oh, you're in depal now and you're on pal now, and then they went back the other way, and they just pass back and forth. Whatever that kind of manifests out in your mind for what might be at your facility, this was low-hanging fruit. 120 plug and air, it's in a day, and now your people don't have to do this. Now that I showed you all the shortcuts, I'm going to tell you there are no shortcuts. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to go through these points, and then I'm going to connect the dots for you if it was not obvious. So depending on where you're at in your operation, in your organization, you might be in crawl, you might be in walking, you might be running, you might be highly automated and have all these things in place already. And I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't know, but maybe you comment in and say, yeah, but what this guy's saying, I agree with. This is how it went for us. What I've seen uh, more than once, not all the time by any stretch, but more than once, I've seen plenty of organizations that are very excited about what they're about to automate, whether that be with a new sorter or a scanning system, whether that be in some advanced AMR, AGV applications, ASRS type of stuff, or whatever it is that they're looking at, and they're very excited about the problem that it's going to solve for them and the efficiencies that they're going to gain. They are applying a solution or technology to a real problem that they're not, as an organization, prepared to support in the way it needs. Maybe as a general way to phrase that. So I've got obviously the bullet points you guys can read and understand kind of where these are building out. But the bottom is where I want to give you the actionables of what this might look like in your facility. So when you're crawling and you're just getting automation, maybe you've got a sorter and you got some conveyors. Maybe you have a little bit of things here and a more advanced, maybe WMS, and you have some nice, applications and dashboards in there for monitoring and strategizing and that type of thing, prioritizing and planning. But it might look like you installed your first robot decal, so your people didn't have to do it, right? Maybe like the video we just watched. And now that people don't have to do it, you're crawling. And when that happens, it's foundational that you that I've seen on the successful organizations that they build a cross-functional team. That might be shift supervisors. It might be from engineering if you have that in your facility, or in your network. Different types of forms of leadership in there. There's a cross-functional team that starts to get built, especially with operators too. So there's training and there's support for, keeping this piece of, let's say, robot, this decal system, highly utilized, working well, supported. People know how to interface with it so that if it has problems, they know how to get it back working. Uh, just all of that must be start to get built out because it's likely that the general culture that's needed and then the framework that supports that doesn't exist yet because you just started crawling, right? And those go good, um, successful, everything's happy, and we're like, this automation thing works. Let's move forward. So now you're starting to get into the walking phase, right? This isn't like from one week to the next, right? There's a progression here over time. But I want to start with this is a lot of times mistaken for running. Like a lot of people went from crawl and they thought they took a shortcut and it's running now because it went so great. Unfortunately, I've seen people do that and I've seen organizations do that. And they live through, a tornado and a hurricane with 1 week worth of thunderstorms. It's if you jump, if you're not prepared, it gets very difficult because you're going to have these foundational blocks first to be successful at each next step. So this might look like you added your second or your third or your fourth or fifth, piece of, let's say it's the exact same decal machine, but you're able to apply it throughout either the same facility or a different facility. But now you're walking, right? We got some pace. We're automating things. We're doing good. And what's going to be important there is that you've now had a team that you've already built cross-functional and you have a way to framework that. So maybe if you're at different facilities, it's different members of that team. And there's a communication that goes on between, say, separate teams or just internally with the teams in the automation in which you're installing in your building. And you're really able to start to understand and measure the impact that automation is making on, let's say, the facility that you're in. Like, hey, this is how it's improving either pick efficiencies or error reduction or labor turnover, any of those aspects of which you could start to measure out the real impact and value that's coming from what you're doing through walking. Time goes on, time goes on, time goes on. Now you're running. And what that looks like, I want to go back to the top bullet points. Walking was building on the success and training early and often and keeping that team involved, right? That feedback loop point. Running is you're scaling through your network. If you had a bunch of buildings, let's say you had 8 buildings, you're scaling through that. You're applying those technologies through this. The key point on that one is that the adoption is critical for you to actually start running. Your team members must be adopting and using the technology, or it must be working well and providing real value if you're ever going to be able to scale it. So people can get stuck in walking because they can't build out the framework in which to understand the value of it so that then they can iterate on, which is down there at the end. I've seen the most successful companies make new initiatives on automation in recognition of the pain points or weaknesses of the current automation and what they did. And they say on building 7 now, and they're back planning how they're going to modernize building 1 from 4 years ago with all the things that they've learned because of the team and the data and the feedback. So again, I could go on this for a long time, but this framework is what I've seen from our successful end users and our successful partners who have done this for end users. Everybody still with me? Good, good, good. All right, so understanding your scale, and I give back the whole team again. A lot like what I told you was required to go from crawl, walk to one. It's a whole team. And I want to give an example, all made up. This is not a customer. This is not a thing. This is just me making up stuff from what I've seen, and applying that. So we have one company here, and they have a distribution center in Maine and Arizona. You can see the big differences here, right? One of them is smaller, does a lot less items, has some old equipment, and doesn't really have anything advanced there. Versus the other one, it's way bigger. There's way more volume through there. It's obviously pretty new. They have a new sorter. They have advanced scan technology. They even have an ASRS. Wow, I mean, this one, how are these in the same company, right? Well, I'll tell you, there's plenty of companies that have buildings that are a lot like this, that the same network with, decades differences in technology in them. Maybe your guys, some of you guys are one of those, right? So what works here through scaling? What works here through the crawl, walk, run? In one facility, yeah, cobots may work great. They're slower, maybe lower payload, but it's a small building. They have a lot of floor space. Maybe they need something that they can wheel in, run for 6 hours, and wheel out, and not use till Thursday. Um, they might need, have some use to move some pallets around with some AGVs, right? And everybody in that whole team said the worst part of every day is on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays when they're doing the palletizing, and it's they have to walk around and stretch wrap the pallets. So as an initiative from the company, they said we're going to put auto stretch wrapper in there, and AGVs will actually bring it to the auto stretch wrapper. So at some point, like, hey, you've hit the points that your team doesn't like. So in the fact of the low hanging fruit, let's say the business case was there and all that, it's also something to immediately recognize value. And there's still a lot of manual stuff going on there. It's a small facility. It doesn't have a lot of volume. You're probably not going to spend $45 million automating everything in there. Right? But you automate the things that make sense and have business case. Versus the same company, but in Arizona with their new facility. Maybe it's their flagship, right? What works there? How does that look different at scale? Well, that one's got industrial robots. They do all the way up to 8.5 foot pallets. They have auto pallet feed, auto pallet stack. They have every kind of cool bell and whistle on the decal system. They got tons of robots driving around in there, doing all kinds of things supporting them, right? Working in tandem with ASRS and their WMS systems. They got a lot of stretch wrappers because those people at that company, at that facility also hated wrapping the pallets in stretch wrap. So they did that. And then the outcome was, yeah, they've got, more of the process is automated, but they still didn't automate everything, right? As they're scaling out, and let's say this process was over 3 years. So this is kind of what I've seen. So don't think it goes from, that lights out facility is happening, next year for you. I got some points over there too on just scaling your automation successfully. Um, Probably the biggest point that I seen in there is that developing your champions at each, again, if they're at different facilities, different locations, like having them in there, and the champions are not, um, you know, the always the plant manager type of person. They're not always an upper leadership type or C-level. Champions happen out on the floor with supervisors and maintenance and shift workers a lot. And again, to the point of if you want to scale it out and you want it to be effective in your organization and provide value, like it needs to be adopted by your team in the way that it's, utilized and in the way in which they know it's valuable. So they put the emphasis on using it and keeping it working well. Future proofing, a phrase I don't like the low hanging fruit because it's hard to take action on future proofing. But it is not just for the happy path. It's not just for your best laid plans. Future proofing is a very good thing to do because we can't count on everything going the way we plan. We're going to have bad quarters. Quarter Q2 might not necessarily be better than Q1, for example. So how does the automation help ease what you're dealing with, right? So I've got some questions and I got some answers, or some parts of an answer, we'll say. So think about what do you get low volumes? Say you're at a facility, you have types of contracts where the volume fluctuates and you don't really have control of that. So what happens when, let's say you were in Arizona, at the previous slide, and you should be pumping 100, 130, 140,000 packages through there a day, and you're down to like 65,000. What do you do with the manual side? So that's in the black bullet points. What I see, and what obviously I don't think there's any counter to the logic. You say, hey, we're not working, you know, this hour shift. It's not from 5 in the morning till noon anymore. It's from 5 to 10 because we just don't have the volume. and we don't have any work to do. If it persists long enough, right, that's the layoffs come, right? If it persists too long, right, that's where companies shut down. But even in the short term, you get like kind of a whole month or a quarter like this, you start getting that range, you start saying, I don't need all of this, labor. And then if it's still kind of tentative and up and down and fluctuates a lot, then you reallocate. You say, oh, today, Joe, you go over here on this machine and for 2 hours, and I'll move you over here and I'll bounce around to find you some valuable things to do. But there are some negatives too on the automation. I think it's obvious that it extends whatever your ROI map was. If you had a 2.5 year ROI and now you're not running the machine 12 hours a day, you're running 8 hours a day, it's going to extend that, right? But the benefit is, again, any form of automation, scan tunnel to AMR to robot arm depaling. Like when you turn it on, it works. When you don't turn it on, it doesn't. It doesn't mind. It's not leaving. It's not going anywhere. When it's got work to do and you tell it to work, it works. So you can modify your process depending on what your changes are. And the automation does not care, and it's not taking home less money because it wasn't taking home money to begin with. Another one's the opposite of that. What happens when you're ready to boom it up next quarter because you got a great contract, like you're a 3PL and you landed this deal and you're about to get it and you've got 3 months to get ready, or maybe a little less, 2 months. You're going to do a hiring push, right? You're going to need labor or you're going to overtime people because you're going to need to get this done, especially if it's a new contract. You got to show your new customer that you're committed to it. And I've seen this happen where people go from 48 hours, a week to 55. And it's just, we got to do it team, rally, we got to go while you're trying to hire in new people and train them and not burn out your current people. It's a challenge. I mean, it's a good thing to have the better contract, but it doesn't mean it was easy or it's going to be easy. Um, with automation, again, specifically on robotics, I've seen this happen. They used to run them 2 shifts a day, and now they got a few guys on night shift, and they just run robots through night. And like they don't have a ton of robots, but they just keep running them, and they catch up, 20,000 items overnight, on third shift or whatever it may be. And then you also obviously you don't hire robots, right? You buy them. You don't hire scan tunnels. You buy them. All right, so you say, okay, we got this coming up. Here's going to be the volumes. We're going to need 2 more systems. Talk to whoever you bought them from the first time, your integrator or your distributor, whoever it was, and you buy them and install them. And you already know they work because you already have them. And then one of them is more the higher point, right? Where we look at from our innovation automation teams, at different organizations. They want to stay flexible, especially with supply chain that we've seen in the last 5 years. I mean, I don't have to recount all the headlines, but if you guys are in the industry, you know how it is and how it's been, and it doesn't necessarily look like that's stabilizing to any point relatively soon. But you want to be flexible, but you want to keep your costs stable. A lot of the things that I've said over there on that left side, on the manual side, are not stable. It's highly variable costing, not fun for your accounting side, your finance side, and more difficult to manage. So what do you do when you're trying to stay flexible and you're trying to keep your costs stable? You carefully manage the way the workflow comes into the facility and out of the facility so that you're staffed appropriately for it, right? And you're in a perpetual hiring cycle. Hopefully some of you guys in your organizations are not, but most that I've seen are. And that's difficult. It's costly. It is what it is. With robots, though, if you have a robust automation, you have, again, I'm in the robot space. I'm very familiar with it. You have advanced vision systems on robots. Like you got new packages, fine. Slip sheets now, fine. Any of these variable and changes, a lot of these advanced technologies are built around the capability to deal with those. So they're already flexible. And whether outside of ROI or business case, if you CapEx it or if you RAST it and you're in some type of contract, those costs are known, those costs are fixed. Whatever else changes, those are the costs and they're already known. So innately they're stable. And the last point I make, I hit it here. How do you show your team as an organization level that you're ready for them to grow? You're ready for the future. You're prepared, right? You're going to be able to deal with the bumps and bruises, the peaks, the valleys, and you're looking forward. Automation is a great way, whether that's in AMRs, whether it's in robotic arms, in picking, placing applications, scan tunnels, WMS systems, even like I said, just a TV monitor, the monitors up there with dashboards and things that give them visibility into the operation and how the building's operating currently. you're telling them a lot with your actions, right? And I've spent a lot of time boots on the ground with team members, many different organizations. They are not oblivious to the job they're doing. The fry cook knows he's cooking fries, and that's what he does, right? The decal guy knows that's what he does. I throw these boxes off this onto the conveyor. And then when I'm done with that, I go over here and I throw those things onto the sorter. And then when I'm done with that, I go and I tie these bags up and I throw them into this Gaylord, right? Like they're not dumb to the fact of knowing that they do a lot of dull, dirty, dangerous, right? Construction guys, obviously, same kind of boat, right? Like they know what they're doing. So don't believe that they think that they're at some peak of their ability to do whatever that they want to do in life. And when you invest in automation, again, it shows in the practice of the actions you've taken that you have planned. You have a plan for what's in the future and you're prepared for what's in the future, which sends the signal in a very obvious way that we are ready for the future and we're planning on the future and we're going to be around for the future. Again, these are more high level outside of it. That's why I blanked them out at first. But investing in automation is an investment and there's business case and ROI and there's all of those things. But there's also investing in that to show the people that you're invested in them and making sure they have a job, making sure they have a career path as well. Right? I've seen plenty of people that get, in organizations where a lot of automations come in and people have moved into like robotics specialized roles where they still do their job, but they also support the robots. Or, maintenance guys that get involved in advanced scanning technologies that were previously did never touch a PLC, for example. So these are great ways for you to help build your team, obviously, and that helps with retention. All right, we made it through all my high level points. What was I talking about? I got a few key takeaways in my same cheeky way. Strangely, it is strange, but there are a lot of fruits. There's a lot of fruits to be had in your building, and it really may be an orchard. So take a look around. Um, I'll go through that again. Highly efficient automated facilities are full team. From guy on day one, understanding your culture, understanding the value of what you're doing there, why you're doing it, and what the future looks like. Full commitment, top to bottom. And scaling in automation is not a copy paste game. It just isn't. Can be in certain applications, you can copy paste machines over and over, but it varies, right? Different facilities, especially, need different things. You could have full industrial decal systems over here, and you can have collaborative ones on this side of the building because they don't do it that much, but they need help. That one fits. Um, and then the last one, dude, the investing in automation, monitoring and having specific KPIs on the piece of automation you put in and understanding how it impacts it and it has a good feedback loop for iterations is key on there. So there's no more questions. Pass it back to Lisa.
Hey. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Just as a reminder, everybody, you'll be receiving a copy of the recording for this webinar. And also, I've got a maturity assessment to send you. It just takes a couple minutes so that you can kind of get an idea of where you're at in your readiness. And then also white paper you might be interested in. So an extra announcement. Let's see. If you scan this QR code, it will lead you to a new webpage that we have that will list the entirety of our season 2 on there. So you can see ahead. You can go ahead and register for our next webinar right now. So that link is live, and we're going to be covering decal and PAL, just a little bit more in depth. So from dock to done, transforming decal and PAL with B-Robox and +1. And so we're going to feature our first guest speaker, Alex Lee. And that's going to be, again, on the 4th Wednesday, which is going to be July 23rd next month at 11 o'clock. Let's see, do I have anything else to update you guys? That is it for today. So if you have any more questions or want to talk a little bit more about automation readiness or just more about +1, please feel free to reach out to either Alex or myself, or also this is another email that will lead to somebody on your team. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.